Hi, welcome to the second video in the series of graphing quadratic functions. This video is going to focus on graphing factored form. So here's what factored form looks like. A lot of people look at the two sets of parentheses, and that's kind of like the red flag that something's in factored form. It doesn't always have to have two sets of parentheses. It might have one set of parentheses that's squared, or if one of these values, this z1 or the z2 was 0, then this might just look like an x. If you watched the previous video on vertex form, you should already know about a value. I'm just going to reiterate a little bit about that. If a is positive, we know that that parabola is going to face up, and if it's negative, it's going to face down. But the z's are standing for zeros, and they're going to be two zeros for a quadratic function. Those are the x-intercepts of the parabola. And notice how the equation, the general form, has minus signs here. So just like in vertex form, we're going to see minus as like the normal form, right? And if it's plus, it actually means minus, right? It's like the opposite of what it looks like. So what are the steps? First step is to plot the zeros. So once you have those on your graph, you're able to find the middle of them. And that's what we're going to do to find or determine the axis of symmetry. We're going to find the middle of those zeros. Once we have that value, we can then plug it in and calculate the y value of the vertex. We can see where on that line is that vertex going to pop up. Once we have that value, we have the points needed, draw the parabola. So let's take a look at our first example. All right, so we see these two sets of parentheses, right? They're being multiplied with each other. That's how we know it's factored form. The first factor is telling us that there is an x-intercept, or a 0, at 3. I wrote it as a point, 3, 0. And this factor, since it says x plus 1, is telling us that there's a 0 at -1. So that was our first step, was to plot the zeros. So I'm going to put those both on the graph. The next step was to find the axis of symmetry. I'm just going to call that AOS for short. Right, it's going to be a vertical line, so it starts with x equals for the equation. And it looks like these are 4 apart, right? So halfway would be 2. So if I just go 2 in either direction from a 0, I find that middle. So right here at x equals 1 is our axis of symmetry. On to the next step, we're going to plug this value into x, and we're going to find where the vertex is. And we're just going to follow order of operations here. So inside parentheses. And then we have some multiplying to do. And we get -8. So this tells us that the vertex is at the point 1, -8. And we'll put that on the grid. So this is enough to draw our parabola. But I also just wanted to point out that we could find some more points just to make it a little bit nicer. Just like we did in the vertex video, we can plug in values that are close to the vertex, like maybe plugging in 0 would be a good idea. So I'm going to do that here. Let's plug in 0 for x. We're going to find the y-intercept this way. So we get 2 times -3 times 1, which is -6. So we have a point at 0, -6. And then the point symmetrical with that one would be at 2, -6. So it just looks a little nicer. And now I'm going to draw in my parabola. Like that. Let's do one more example. Now notice our second example doesn't look like it's in factored form. Well, that means that we're going to try to factor it and put it in factored form. So let's see. I believe this factors into these two binomials, right? They both start with x. We need a 5 and a 1. but one number needs to be negative. I'm going to do it as positive 5 and negative 1 so that they add up to positive 4. So this was standard form. Now it's in factored form. So let's go from there to the zeros. We know that the zeros are going to be from these two values. This says plus 5, so that's at negative 5, 0. Minus 1 means it's at positive 1, 0. Let's plot those. Good. And now let's find the middle to find the axis of symmetry. It looks like negative 2 is the middle. So x equals negative 2 is the axis of symmetry. Now we're going to plug that number in to find the vertex. Now you have a choice of plugging it into the standard form or the factored form. I like the factored form. I think it's less work. And here we get 3 times negative 3, which is negative 9. So our vertex is at negative 2, negative 9. We can plot that right there. And let's find more points. Little throwback to the last video. Remember, we can use this a value, which is actually invisible on this one. This one happens to be a 1. We are allowed to go up 1, since it is a 1, and over 1 from the vertex, and we can do that in both directions. And that is our parabola. Let me draw this in. And notice that that parabola is opening up, just like it should if that a value was positive. All right, so remember there's one more video in this series about graphing standard form, and that's going to be for the standard form equations that are not factorable. So I hope you can take a look at that. Thanks for watching.